Photosensitivity warning, viewer discretion is advised. A fighting game where two warriors face off with each other, deadly blades in hand. Combos are quick, but very painful, and any mistake can lead to the loss of the entire round in a feudal Japanese setting. Most likely, you thought about Samurai Shodown. That's a very basic overview of the series, and doesn't even take into account the vast majority of experimental changes that the series has witnessed over the years. However, as one of SNK's flagship IPs and still going strong with Samsho 7, it's easily become one of my favorite fighting game IPs to date. Samsho 1 was a smash hit, and Samsho 2 fared even better for SNK at a time where fighting games had very little to go off of. It was Street Fighter with swords, but that's all it needed to be, and it worked. Then comes Samurai Shodown 3, known in Japanese as Samurai Spirit's Zankuro Musoken, or Zansamu for short. To say they changed things up and is an understatement. Samsho 3 is that experimental middle shelf game. The same way King of Fighters 96 was an experimental shakeup for KOF that structured the series moving forward. Or how Fatal Fury 3 bridged the gap between Fatal Fury Special and Real Bow. But what makes Samsho 3 stand out? Well, what if I told you that Samsho 3 is if Samsho was an anime fighter? It may not be the most accurate description, but let's remember a few points. For one, this is SNK we're talking about. They're very experimental in the most beautifully jank ways with many of their games. They also pushed the envelope as far as they could in several regards during the arcade heyday, becoming wizards of their own hardware. Samsho 3 is absolutely no exception to that. And secondly, well, let's just briefly go over what the game has. There's infinites, death combos, massive damaging attacks, infinite supers, god-tier set play, air blocking, pre-round movement, high-octane action, death at a moment's notice. You can't really see what makes this game crazy until you play it for yourself. A bullet point list doesn't do it justice with all the zany, ridiculously 90s tech this game has to offer. But first, this video wouldn't have been possible without the significant help of not only the Japanese Samurai Shodown community, but Moyo Moyo-san as well, and the massively abundant number of resources available online too. Moyo Moyo-san domo arigatou gozaimashita. Welcome to the Samurai Shodown 3 guide video. Let's get this out of the way. If you don't like broken fighting games, don't even bother. This game is incredibly 90s, and while it isn't technically hard to learn for the most part, even the tiniest mistake is enough to cost you the entire round. And you might think to yourself, well yeah, Samsho is a series where damage is huge, so that's expected. And you'd sort of be right, except Samsho 3 is also the kind of game where nearly every character has bullshit. A lot of it. A lot of it. I mean a lot of it. This is scratching the surface. And on that note, the game quickly gets very repetitive. It doesn't take long for you to learn what each character is capable of, and you'll be seeing it over and over and over again. You have to deal with it every match, however. But on the flip side, that's also the game's selling point to me. It's simple enough to pick up, and it's cruel when you don't know the knowledge checks. But there's so few fighting games that give me the same consistent thrill whenever I decimate my opponent with whatever dirty tech is available to me in-game. Each hit is brutal in this game, and matches fly by so fast that I immediately feel that rush every time. Want to play a fighting game where sudden death is always around the corner? That's my takeaway. If you enjoy broken games, and especially the idea of your opponent dying at a moment's notice, this game is at least worth trying. One mistake, and you're dead. It doesn't take too much investment either, so it makes for a good side game as well. And why does Japan love the game so much? Moyo Moyo-san gave me quite a few reasons, which I'll paraphrase. The easy to understand game systems, very fast gameplay, matches are short, and how it perfectly encapsulates the feel of 90s appeal when fighting games were a lot rougher. Plus, at high-level play, it becomes much more defensive-focused due to the instant death nature of the game's pacing. Of course, if you're a Samsho or SNK fan in general and love the fact that their games are beautiful works of fighting game art, broken or not, I'd say it's a disservice to not at least try it. The slash and bust system alone makes the game worth trying out for the innovation it brought to the Samsho formula, so let's not hesitate and start learning the controls. If you've played Samsho 7 or even Samsho's 4 or 6, the controls are already very straightforward. You use the lever to move, jump, crouch, block back or down back, backdash, and run forwards. With blocking, you also have access to air blocking to make jumping a lot safer too. A is light slash, B is medium slash, C is heavy slash, and D is kick. Very simple stuff. You have proximity normals for both standing and crouching attacks, jump attacks. The kick button has various different types of kicks depending on the direction held. Pressing AB lets you sidestep to avoid incoming attacks. Press AB when next to the opponent and you'll initiate a circle step where your character flips sides and, well, circles around the opponent to appear behind them. This allows you to cross up the opponent and, much more importantly, deal back hits for a much higher hit stun. BC is the universal overhead for each character. Forward or back C lets you throw the opponent with a proximity throw. ABC together lets you charge up your rage meter for early rage, though you hardly ever get to use it given the fast nature of this game. Lastly, to deflect attacks, it's a half circle forward motion, no buttons pressed. That's the entirety of the controls, not much to learn and is easy to pick up. But we can't learn the mechanics without picking a character first, so let's do that and pick Haomaru. Immediately, you're greeted with picking either slash or bust. What seems like nothing more than a color swap is actually you picking between two variants of the same character. They share the same normals, same general properties, and a couple shared special moves, but beyond that, they're wholly different characters. For example, Slash Haomaru is the typical Shodo you see in every fighting game. Run-of-the-mill, nothing too crazy, but cozy and familiar with an added air fireball. Bust Haomaru, however, trades in the air fireball and a few other tools for a much dirtier and aggressive playstyle to forcibly mix up the opponent up close. While only a very general overview, it makes clear that these are two separate characters with their own mix of tools to work with. As such, they are also treated separately in the meta. Zankuro is the only exception to this rule since the slash and bust variants are identical to each other. The only difference is that you're picking between colors and nothing more. After picking between slash and bust, you are then given the option between three choices: medium grade, beginner class, and expert grade. Medium grade is the vanilla Samsho 3 experience. You gain rage at a normal rate and have access to all the ordinary mechanics with no strings attached. Beginner class lets you auto-block attacks up to 5 times, so long as your character is in a state where they can block. This lets you avoid mix-ups or other deadly scenarios worry-free. You gain rage much slower, however, and in certain matchups, having those auto-blocks can lead to your own demise if your opponent can capitalize off of you blocking, like Genjuro. Expert grade makes it so you are permanently raged, giving you infinite super and damage boost, but you cannot block at all. Also worth noting that expert grade has its own meta I'll discuss in a future video. For the most part though, people pick medium grade, so let's pick that. Unlike my other guide videos, I'll keep the mechanics on the lighter side of things. There's a lot of small details to talk about, but let's worry about the essentials. When loading into the match, you'll notice you can actually move around before the rounds start. You can't jump or circle step, not even run, but this still makes for an interesting round start interactions. In worst case scenario, be the exact moment someone loses the round. You can do instant round start command grabs, buffer jump, instant circle steps, try to back the other player into a corner, try to run away yourself, whatever your heart desires. Players will very frequently just walk into each other, but it still opens up the gateways for varying round start options. Another thing you'll notice, the timer starts at 99 seconds, but is also quite fast. For every real-world second that passes, 2 in-game seconds on the timer pass. Keep this in mind so that you have a better idea of how much time is actually left in the match, but it roughly equates to 50 seconds per round. Regarding the universal overhead, it is safe on hit versus crouching opponents, but punishable on hit on standing opponents, and in some oddball cases, doesn't even hit the crouching opponent. Be sure to look up the details for your character's universal overhead to avoid making any potentially fatal errors. On block, many attacks can recoil. Unlike other Samsho games, however, you cannot cancel recoil off of block, but this is mitigated by normals being generally safer on block. Dash attacks are self-explanatory, an attack you do while running. They vary per character, but share a general rule of thumb. 66A is a jab, 66B is a stronger slash, and 66D is usually a fast knockdown kick. 66C, however, is a slow unblockable attack that you can unleash to open up your opponent. For the most part, these unblockable dash attacks are pretty mediocre, with weak damage and often pushing the opponent too far back to connect the full attack. The exception being Ukyo's second hit, and Zankuro's by far being the best of the bunch as it dashes forward and knocks down on hit. Counter hits trigger when you attack an opponent while they're performing an attack. Put simply, the sooner you interrupt them, the greater the damage dealt, with the fastest punishes reaching up to 170% damage, leading to potentially brutal damage. Unlike other titles in the series, throws contain no built-in follow-up. Forward throw only gives you a front hit window, however a back throw puts the opponent's back towards you for a back hit. Keep in mind you cannot throw back-turned or stunned opponents. You also only have so many follow-ups as you get a set amount of advantage after a throw. Both the forward throw and the back throw have their own set of frame data as well. You can even option select the throws with AC or CD instead of just C to avoid failed throw attempts. The Sidestep and Circle Step are incredibly powerful defensive tools to avoid damaging attacks altogether. As mentioned in controls, AB lets you sidestep, and AB near the opponent initiates Circle Step. If you're near the opponent but wish to sidestep instead, hold back AB to avoid doing Circle Step. If you happen to strike your opponent's back, they're staggered for much longer than usual. This, in turn, leads to many back hit only combos to be possible, including infinites and so forth, all of which are so strong that to not learn them is at your own detriment. A very important note, however, is that while Zankuro will still receive back hit properties, he is immune to back hit combos, giving him extra safeguards in all matchups. When deflecting an attack, also known as parrying, as mentioned, it is simply a half circle forward motion. This puts the opponent in a stagger animation where you can follow up with your own punish. Parrying heavy attacks will not cause them to drop their weapon like future games, however. Characters who have dropped their weapon will have access to unarmed normals and lose access to most special moves, which vary by character. A big disadvantage, but picking up the weapon only requires running up to it and pressing a button to pick it back up. If you're disarmed, you can perform a blade catch that disarms the opponent back to give yourself extra breathing room. The timing on blade catch is much stricter than a standard deflect, however. When knocked down, you can hold left or right to roll in that direction on wake up instead of standing up in the same spot. With air block, some attacks are air unblockable, It depends on the attack itself whether it is air unblockable or not. This prevents jumps from being completely safe, but there's still very low commitment. Just be wary about what options your opponent has for air unblockables. Once in a while, you'll enter Weapon Clash. You'll enter a minigame where you simply mash buttons and whoever mashes better wins the exchange and disarms the opponent. If both players tie, then no one is disarmed. There's 2 ways to trigger this with separate conditions to be met for each one. Not the end of the world if you're disarmed, but not something to slouch on either. Rage is a very familiar mechanic of the Samsho series that works similarly here, but has some unique quirks. Holding ABC will charge Rage, and when it's full, it will give you a damage boost and access to Super for a set period of time. You also gain Rage taking damage. Rage only goes away when you either land your Super or after some time has passed. Problem is, you very rarely have the chance to charge up. You also gain permanent Rage when your life falls below 25% health. If you have already lost a round, this is instead changed to 50% life when you gain permanent Rage. When performing Super, also known as weapon flipping technique, you will disarm the opponent after a big flashy attack that deals a huge chunk of damage if it doesn't otherwise kill them. And bonus tip, the game will tell you your character's super input right above the rage meter so you don't have to memorize it. Just remember that it does not side switch, but only displays relative to the player's starting position. Another simple but important mechanic is items. Now no, this is not Smash Brothers, but there are 2 items that will periodically fall into the match. There's food, and then there's bombs. The food heals for 25% of your lost health, whereas the bomb will interrupt either player and do minor unblockable damage that knocks down on hit. Where each item falls depends on the situation, but basically relates to player position. While this mechanic sounds awful, trust me when I say you will quickly see both items as a blessing when they act in your favor. And yes, healing from the meat can put you above the permanent rage threshold, so you go back to limited rage. Bombs can even combo break you out of certain death if luck has it land on you. One last detail worth noting, in general hitboxes are wonky. Hit detection doesn't always work in some combos, and a lot of attacks also suffer from weird blind spots. Once you're used to the game, then avoiding these issues is actually pretty easy, but keep it in mind so you aren't confused when it happens either. Overall, if you've played other fighting games or even other Samsho games in general, most of these mechanics aren't anything new, but even if you're starting out, there's very little to sweat about. While there are definitely some finer details in the system, for the most part these mechanics are pretty self-explanatory, more than enough to ease you into the game from the get-go. Now that you've played a few matches and labbed the game out, it's time to enter some tournaments. Samsho 3 is most dominantly played in Japan, whereby they actually practice 2 sets of rules. There's of course the normal Samsho 3 gameplay, anything goes as long as it doesn't completely crash the game. As I mentioned, with the existence of Expert Grade, there's actually a whole separate set of tournament rules where everyone plays Expert Grade. I will create a separate video in the future discussing Expert Grade gameplay in a competitive format as it drastically changes how matches play out and character viability as well. As I'm sure you've also picked up by now, this game is broken. However, no bans. If you banned Bustao Maru, you'd have to ban /Genjiro, and if you banned him, you'd have to ban Nakaruru, and if you banned her, you'd have to ban Zankuro as well, and from there, Shizumaru. In fact, you'd pretty much have to ban the entire roster, as banning anything would effectively rip the game of its identity and what ultimately makes it fun in the first place. This is the kind of game where you either suck it up and accept everything as fair game, or go play other fighting games. It's being harsh, but it's the truth. Ban one thing, and someone will counteract that by saying ban another thing. To clarify, I don't say any of this to deliberately be a dick. Rather, this is a 90s fighting game, the genre is still in its early years, so please temper your expectations. Tier list discussion wise, this is Moyo-Moyo-san's current tier list in regards to vanilla Samsho 3, updated as of May 2021. This takes account of regular Samsho 3 gameplay, as an expert grade tier list is different. Keep in mind, you can pretty much play whoever you like and you'll probably be okay. Even he agrees no one is truly abysmal, but this game is unapologetically top heavy too. Generally speaking, Samsho 3 matches are quite fast and place both players rushing to secure the round before their opponent can. In many cases, it's split-second life or death choices. The less your character has to interact and commit to securing a round, the better. So in short, the top tiers have to commit very little at optimal play, whereas the lower tiers have to put in a lot more just to get one round. Of course, there will still be occasions you need to play neutral, but outside of that, you're playing to screw over your opponent as hard as your character lets you. I'll also link to the tier list in the description below. If there's interest, I'll discuss the Japanese tier list in greater detail in a separate video and give further input from the Japanese player base. But for now, that's the basic gist. Higher tiers have to interact less and score rounds much easier than lower tiers, with bottom 3 being bad, out-of-place characters. Still, play who you like. The game's broken nature makes it so everyone has tech, and as such, balances itself out. As to who to start the game with, there's no real right or wrong answer, but I'll quickly glance over the Japanese First Step Guide's order of characters to play. My opinion on who to play as a beginner is more or less identical to this list as well, so I'll only briefly discuss my beginner picks. Before that, Zankuro is the boss character of the game, but you can play as him with a code, and yes, to reiterate, he is very much tournament legal. Picking Zankuro is fairly annoying, but the code is easy to remember. You basically make an infinity sign, wait till the timer hits 3, and press AB together to select him. If you fail, however, you're made to pick Shizumaru. If you plan on maining Zankuro, either assign an AB button combo, practice the code several times over, or have a pocket Shizumaru ready. Also worth noting that you cannot pick Zankuro in single-player arcade runs, only versus matches. Slash Harumaru is your typical Shodo, harmless and nothing extravagant to overwhelm you. Simple pick who can do just enough to help teach you. Slash Nakaruru is a technical character with high skill ceiling, but the skill floor is low enough to get used to the basics, though optimally playing her with all her death combos and such will take some time. Zankuro is also a very easy pick with easy combos, simple to understand buttons, and whatnot while also retaining back hit combo immunity, so back hits are less punishing. Shizumaru is also just simple enough in 3 that he's not very complicated to play either, very strong buttons and easy to use tools with solid movement as well. Slash Genjiro is an easy pick too with some incredibly strong tools at his disposal, especially on block and back hits. That said, I do feel it's a little too easy to get complacent with his command grab, especially on block. Lastly, Makusa can also be a good beginner pick, but picking between either slash or bust results in little advantage over one or the other. That, and also depends on whether you can consistently land his 2D death combo or not, as well as dealing with his bad buttons and knowing when to teleport and weapon flipping technique effectively. His actual gameplay, though, is very simple, so I recommend Makusa with an asterisk. While Bust Harumaru is easy enough to get by with on front hit infinite alone, you're not really learning the game by trying to make him your first character, especially since to play him optimally, you need to learn to convert into death combos instead of getting complacent with overhead sand. Now where can I play this game? Put simply, you can find matches with players on Fightkey 2, which is very easy to set up and is free. It even comes with a training mode Lua script to practice the game. I won't explain how to use the training mode here, other videos do a much better job, but here's 2 important notes. 1. You can open up to the training mode menu by pressing the coin button 4 times or holding it for a few seconds. A lot of options are available to you. 2. Using the script does not automatically turn off the AI from attacking you, that's why the Fight Key button loads it up in a 2-player match. There's also the Samurai Shodown Neo Geo collection, which remains a solid casual collection of the series. However, I would advise against the Neo Geo collection specifically if you're looking to play competitively, mostly due to the lack of anyone online to play. What's worse, there's no training mode options either, and while most issues at launch have been fixed, Backhits still remains more active. If you're in Japan, Game Center Mikado is easily the biggest Samsho 3 hub in the country. They even have their own YouTube channel where they stream their arcade games and host several VODs of Samsho 3 gameplay, both normal and expert graded rules. Besides this video, you can find much more info over on Mizumi Wiki, as well as Japanese Wiki over on AtWiki. But to say the Japanese player base is immensely dedicated to this game is an understatement, as they continue to provide so many sources of game info over the years. Besides that wiki, there's also the Jumpstart Guide written by Moyomoyo-san, which contains all sorts of beginner-related info, tier list placings, bugs, other nerdy stuff, and even the most niche of topics like console differences, and even discussing the Game Boy version of Samsho 3 briefly. Hell, you can go onto the L site or even DMM to find a whole 4 doujinshis worth of info that you can buy for dirt cheap yen to get started with Samsho 3. They even include cute drawings but nonetheless provide practical info. And within these doujins are even included QR codes that link to videos and other sites to visit, and furthermore, the great work that Moyomoyo-san and Shoegazer4126-san put into documenting and showcasing Samsho 3 for the world to see. And yes, there's even resources for frame data. Even if some info remains language locked, the fact remains that the Japanese fighting game scene absolutely loves this game and have done so much to document and provide resources for anyone to enjoy. Now, I'd love to discuss Samsho 3 even more in this video, as it is easily my second favorite Samsho, just behind Samsho 7, but I just wanted to cover the basics and provide people an extra reference for learning the game. It is an unapologetically jank game, one that may require the patience of a saint, but it's for the exact same reason that it is unique and so much fun for me. Experimental and questionable on a technical standpoint, but set so many standards for the series moving forward, and to this day remains fun in its own way. And anyone who knows me and my taste in fighting games, if it's jank, then chances are I love it. Samsho 3 is no different, only further cementing my love of Samurai Shodown as a whole, but is truly an amazing fighting game series. As long as you don't take the game too seriously and just have fun, then I think you'll have a better chance of finding what makes the game charming. Whether it be how broken it is, the darker presentation, the gameplay innovations, the new characters, or its wonderful music, it's quite clear that Samsho 3 still remains a popular entry and is held near and dear by a good chunk of fans across the globe. If this video helps even one person get into the game or show how the ridiculous nature of it is what makes it a fun time, then I'm more than happy to have made it. Now go play some Samsho 3. I never intended this video or any of my other videos to take forever to come out, but I had quite a few real life matters take place, so I halted the finishing of these videos. However, knowing me, I will likely have a tendency to upload videos more far apart from each other than intended. All I can really say is sorry, it's kind of a bad habit of mine to work on multiple projects at a time. But besides that, I got to go to Texas Showdown and I loved it. I met so many wonderful people, including the Saigatos duo, Justin Wong, Not Very Good, Gail Winquo, and several others. I'm glad to have met every single one of you. I even got to play Hyper Neo Geo 64 games in real life. From Buriki 1's Samsho 64 2, aka Warrior's Rage. A ton has happened that weekend and I'm forever grateful, so thank you very much. And thanks still for sticking around this long to the end of the video. Peace everyone, this has been Rich Massacre, or my bad, Lich Massacre, telling you to go enjoy some Samsho 3.